Hey guys, Keith from Kegland, and today we're talking about the new Polyphoenix still, and we're gonna do a distillation run showing you how to make vodka essentially, or just neutral ethanol essentially. Now this is a great video if you're wanting to make neutral alcohol to then use to make gin, or use some of our Impressors range of products. But a lot of what I'm talking about today applies to distillation in general. Now we do have other stills on our website other than this, so we do have things like this little Alco engine. This little bad boy is a very, very popular design. Now this reflux still here, for instance, this will easily get you sort of above 90%. People frequently get to the 92, 93, or even up to 94% ABV. But what we're aiming for today with the Polyphoenix is we really want to get azeotrope. So when you're getting up to that 96%, it doesn't sound like much more than 94% ABV, but that extra 2% makes a huge difference in terms of the actual taste of the vodka. And that's especially the case if you've got a pretty nasty turbo yeast type of wash. So like today what I've done is we're going to use this wash here. Now this particular wash is made with dextrose and turbo yeast. Now a lot of distillers out there don't like using turbo yeast because of the fact that it produces a bit of a nasty smell. But I'm hoping with the SPP packing in here, with the fairly long column, and with the absolute sort of bad boy that I've got stacked up over here, that we can get pretty much azeotrope out of this thing. And if we're getting azeotrope, it's going to knock back a lot of the nasty flavors that you get from a lot of turbo yeast. Now the reason why I've got this here as well is we've been doing a lot of fermenting and testing on various different new turbo yeast strains. So it's quite likely we're going to bring out our own version of Impressors turbo yeast in the not too distant future. And because of that, we've got literally loads of this stuff lying around. It's been testing so many different yeasts and batches. So I'm going to pour this into the boiler. But before I do, I also wanted to show you one last thing before I do that, which is really important, and that is making sure you try to clarify your wash as much as possible before you put it in the boiler, which is what I'm going to do now. With these particular types of turbo yeast, if you have any yeast which is left over in there and that ends up in the boiler, what happens as soon as you flick that boiler on, the elements start heating up, the yeast cells break open, and you get all this extra nasty stuff come out of the yeast cells. So you're really doing yourself a massive favor if you can start with a turbo wash which is properly clarified. Now there's heaps of awesome clarifying agents these days. Look, the silicon-based ones are some of my favorites. With that said, for this particular experiment, all we've done is something really simple and just left the whole fermenter in the fridge, chilled it. And because we've chilled the fermenter, a lot of that yeast is dropped out of suspension, and it's actually pretty clear. So as you can see there in the cup, you can see my kind of hand behind that. And look, for a smell, I wouldn't say it smells fantastic, but look, none of the turbo yeast smell awesome, to be honest with you. If you really want to make a very, very good wash and make it easy on yourself, I would recommend only fermenting up to sort of, max like 10% ABV. Because when you start pushing that yeast up to sort of 20% ABV, you're really starting to kick off some nasty esters and aromas that come out of the wash as well. So, in this instance, we were pushing the yeast to the max because we want to test the yeast, the actual alcohol tolerance of the yeast. And this wash is 20% ABV, which is sort of, very high yielding. If you want to get maximum alcohol, out of your distillation run, then, go up to 20% for sure. But like in reality, if you want super clean vodka, you may even consider going a fair bit less. Anyway, let's fill up the boiler and get stuck into this distillation run. All right, so I've filled up the boiler. So I've got about 40 liters of 20% ABV wash in there, and I've hooked up all my hoses. Good opportunity for me to explain why I've set it up like this. Essentially, I'm using this packed column with the SPP. Look, the SPP is a bit expensive. I'm sure you can get cheaper packing out there. You could use something like glass marbles, stainless steel scrubbers, stuff like that. But look, I find the SPP is the best as far as, packing goes. And it's got me by far the best results I've ever used with any still. I've actually even used SPP in quite small stills, and it's significantly increased the performance. So even one where I've got like an air still that was producing producing sort of in the vicinity of about 90%, switched out the packing, SPP in there, and then went up by another 2% ABV. So look, I think it's really worth investing in good, packing myself. The other thing I like about the SPP is it's easy to take out of the column and just put it in a big mesh bag, stick in the dishwasher and clean it out. And then you can just pour it back into the column. While you get things like stainless steel scrubbers and stuff like that, getting them packed to an even density throughout the column is tricky, to say the least. You have to sort of fiddle around and it's hard to get exactly right. Another thing I should also mention is some of you are probably looking at this bubble capper over here and saying, why aren't you using the bubble capper? And you absolutely can make fantastic vodka out of a bubble capper still as well. But you just got to remember, to get the equivalent of this much reflux inside a bubble capper, I'd have to use about maybe 20, 23, around about slightly over 20 of these bubble capper chambers in order to get the equivalent effect of just 1 meter of packing with SPP. So it's much more compact and will essentially achieve the same thing. But also, as you can imagine, if I had 20 of these segments stacked up, I don't even think I could fit it in this room because the roof's not high enough. So like cost-wise, and also for the ergonomics or convenience of having not such a tall still, you're way better off getting a pack column than using bubble cappers if you're talking about making neutral alcohol. Now, with respect to the plumbing, let me show you how I've got this set up. I've got cold water coming into this inlet here. Now, I've got very, very steady water pressure because I've actually got a regulator back further upstream here. You will find that water pressure in most buildings will change up and down. And if you're on tank pressure or something like that, where you've got a water pump cycling on and off, then definitely you'd want to somehow regulate it. We do sell actually little inline regulators you can buy and actually attach that to the still using these duo-tight connectors. So you could actually get a duo-tight connector on the inlet, put in the water regulator, and that way if somebody's like flushing the toilet, it's not going to cause variations in your distillation run. One thing that we really want to achieve in any type of distillation run like this is very even controls as possible. So the more even it is, the more consistent the results. Because if you get fluctuations, let's say the temperature goes up suddenly for a short period, what happens is impurities or things like the tails start coming through and will start actually, smearing your different cuts. So what'll happen is tails will then get into the hearts of what you're trying to distill and you're not getting very good separation of the final product. So keeping everything absolutely as even as possible is really, really important. I just can't stress that enough. Now, with this particular process, I'm going to fire up this still. It'll probably take about, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes to get to temperature, and then we'll kick the process off. So the way I've got the cooling set up, I've got basically the coolant water running into the bottom of the shotgun or Liebig condenser we've got here. Now, you always want to run it in the opposite direction. That's why it's going like this. So it's coming into the bottom here and then basically running through, then coming out the top. So I've got spirit running in this direction and it's counter flow. So I've got the coolant water running in the opposite direction. Now, I've already got a regulator. You can't see it in the camera, but it's just off screen here where I'm regulating the water supply. Definitely one of the things about any type of distillation is you really want to keep those everything as stable as possible because small fluctuations will cause smearing. That's one thing you really don't want. So if somebody's like flushing toilets in the house or you've got a water tank running off a pressure pump and that's cycling on and off, those types of variations will be an absolute headache for you. So one thing that I would highly recommend is regulating your water. We've got really inexpensive inline regulators you can use, and also with these duo-tight fittings on the quick swivel connectors, I could even put one on here and have it like sticking out here and then just put the water supply on that as well. But in this instance, it's already regulated over here, so I don't have to worry about it. Now the water's obviously flowing in the opposite direction through the shotgun. So it's coming out the top here, and then after it flows through the shotgun, it goes into the product condenser on the top here. So I've got the water coming through here. That way the coldest possible water is coming in contact with the spirit before it exits. That way the spirit is coming out nice and cold and I'm not going to get too much losses in evaporation. And then that slightly warmer water is going to exit out of this shotgun into this spirit condenser. Now, if you want to get like really tight control over the process, some people actually have an inlet hose coming into the shotgun and then have a separate inlet hose coming into the product condenser. Look, I've found for this process doesn't really make that much difference as long as all your processes are very stable. And then it comes out of here through this hose, and this one here is just going off to the drain I've got behind me as well. So I'm going to start this process with both of these valves closed. Now for today, I'm going to use the vapor management and the liquid management, but I'm going to start with both of these valves closed. And while that boiler's heating up, I'm basically going to keep an eye on this. Probably it's going to take me another 40 minutes to get up to temperature, and then we'll start taking off the heads and complete the distillation run. Distillate has been coming up the column and hitting the product condenser, and it's basically been at 100% reflux for now probably about 15 minutes. So it's very much stabilized now. One thing you'll notice, the temperature on the thermometer, that's the thermometer just coming in the side here, it's taking a very, very stable reading. That's what I'm looking for. Don't start taking your heads off and other stuff like that until you get a very stable reading on that thermometer. The other little thing I want to mention, it's important that with this type of distillation, you don't want the thermometer going in and coming in contact with the liquid falling down from the product condenser. It's going to give you a false reading. This is one of the beautiful things about, I'll say, having a clear still. If you had a stainless or copper still, you'd probably have a thermometer in there with no idea if you got drips falling down onto the thermometer. But it's really important. What we're trying to do is capture the gas, or vapor, which is inside the top of the head here, and capture that core vapor temperature. So that's really important. So I've got the probe sticked in as far as I can possibly get it, but without sort of being, inside the liquid flow stream. Next thing I want to mention is the column is really clean. I didn't mention this earlier on, but if you do, spirit run after spirit run, you'll notice that the packing starts to really stench like crap. Now, if you've got packing which really stinks, especially when you've got if you've distilled so far as you've gone right into the tails, what'll happen is all the packing will start to get all those fusel oils and stuff like that all the way in the column. Really important before you start a distillation run is make sure the column and the packing should be so clean that you pick up some of the packing, you smell it, and you can't smell anything, because that's what you're looking for. You want to make neutral spirit, you've got to start with a clean still. Lastly, I'll also mention it's a good idea to have some copper in a still. Acts like a catalytic converter, help releasing sulfides. Look, sulfides do come out of solution just normally. If you air the spirit, for instance, they'll get released. But it does happen faster, hence, it's a catalytic converter. And that's why I've got copper in the top of the still. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you got to have copper everywhere, make the whole still out of copper or whatever. But like the reality is, there's diminishing returns. As long as you've got like a bit of surface area like that, that's fine. I want you to treat the copper as a consumable part though. This copper, really what you should be doing is every time you clean the still out, you should be acid washing the copper. Obviously, if you have a whole copper still and you're acid washing it, you're eventually going to eat through the body of the still as well, or start to eat through the welds in particular, or some of the joins is usually where it starts to fail. So look, in my opinion, you're better off getting something which is cheap and consumable. You could even use like scrap copper, like chop up a whole lot of copper pipe if you want to save a few bucks. But look, these copper scrubbers have a lot of surface area, and I think they're like $2 on the website. So look, I'm just chucking that in the top there. Now, I've already got this set up with my water flow kind of optimized. I basically got, look, this is the middle of summer at the moment. So our groundwater temperature for just the cold water tap is basically 25 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty warm. And then I've got it going through the still head. I'm checking the water that's coming out. And my water temperature is sitting at about 35.5 degrees, or somewhere between 35, 36 degrees. And that's giving me a very stable reading now as well. One thing you want to be careful of is you don't want the water temperature coming out of the still head and being really over 50 degrees. That's too hot. I personally try to keep it under 40 even. So, you can increase or decrease the water flow speed. I'm running at 3 liters per minute, which is giving me a temperature on the output there at 35 degrees Celsius. Perfect. Really handy in this type of situation to have a few of these, instant read thermometers. You can go around, just sort of keep an eye on things. Look, eventually we might make a distillation controller which has multiple different probes. You can plug it in everywhere or something like that, and then keep an eye on the temperature throughout the entire process. Anyway, let's start taking these cuts. Now, before I start collecting spirit, I'll also tell you that all of these types of little kitchen thermometers, they can be off by plus or minus, 1 or 2 degrees pretty commonly. So one thing I will say is don't look for a precise temperature on these thermometers. It's the wrong way to look about distillation, especially when you're doing reflux distillation. So I want you to think about, when you're running this type of still, get this number, which is on the still, irrespective of whatever that is. In this case, it's 77.3, where the still has stabilized. Write that number down. And when the temperature starts to climb, let's say 1 or 2 or 3 degrees above that, depending on how fast you're taking off the alcohol, that is when you have reached the end of the collection run. So I want you to think about it that way and not an absolute figure, like, because there's a lot of, incorrect information out there online where people say, oh, you got to make sure you collect your alcohol at this precise temperature, and the reality is, thermometers just aren't that precise. So anyway, let's start taking off the head. So I've got this Hoffman clamp here. I'm going to undo this. There's no need to undo this all the way. You can see I've got, spirit, which is, full in this side of the tube, and I've just started to undo that, and you can see it flowing down the tube. It doesn't have to be a super fast rate. Mind you, we're trying to keep the whole process as stable as possible. So if we're just sort of like dumping heaps of spirit out of the column, we're going to get the temperatures start to change, and then we're going to, have some stability problems once again. So I've got that coming through this shotgun or Libby condenser, and you can see my little alchemeter has just started to float there, which is perfect. And I'm going to feel this. Yeah, it's coming out pretty much like stone cold. So I reckon that's pretty close to my groundwater temperature at a bit of a guess. But look, I'll take a reading on that. Look, it's looking fairly pure as far as I can see here. Because I have got this, basically a dextrose and sugar wash, I'm not really going to have a lot of methanol in the heads, to be honest with you. But look, I'm just going to turf, 100 mils of the heads away anyway, just to be sure. And after I've done that, I'm going to clear the whole distillation parrot, empty the entire thing as well, just to be sure I've got that out of the system. Anyway, I'll come back in a few minutes. As you can see, I've got the spirit coming out about 25 degrees Celsius, and on the alchemeter, it's like reading, look, it's pretty damn close to azeotrope, to be honest with you. It's sitting somewhere above the 95. It's probably 96 or something like that. I don't know. I'll have to get the easy dens out and just double check that in a second. I've already collected the 100 mils or more than 100 mils now. PET is a perfectly fine storage vessel to collect your spirits into if you're using PET. Obviously, you've got to remember the spirit's got to land in here cold, because PET really is not suitable for temperatures up to 50 degrees or above. And then similarly with the duo-type fittings I've got on the base here, they're made out of polyketone. We've got EPDM seals and also silicon seals in those. So look, these types of fittings, or the duo type fittings, are also suitable for contact with hot or cold spirit for that matter. I will put the one caveat in there though. If you're using any tubing, our ever barrier tubing is perfectly fine for having spirit contact. However, the ever barrier tubing can't handle the heat really above about 60 degrees or 50 degrees. So basically don't use it in somewhere where it's going to come in contact with hot spirit. Anyway, look, I'm going to empty this distillation parrot because I've got this ball valve on the base here. This is sort of a bit of a modification to the standard setup, but I'm just going to empty the parrot out. So I don't really want to blend these heads with the main collection. So I'm going to open this ball valve, and just going to take off that spirit there until the parrot's completely empty. I'm also going to dump this PET container in the sink, and then I'm going to wash this PET container thoroughly out as well, just to be 100% sure. Okay, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to turn this ball valve back off again, and now I'm collecting essentially the good vodka. Okay, my liquid management is now turned completely off, and I've got my vapor management here open to about halfway. You can see it sort of squashing the tube, just slightly reducing that output. And this is giving me a flow rate now down here where it's just sort of forming a bit of a stream like that. Now, to be honest with you, you probably could go a bit faster than that without really much sacrifice to the purity. But look, I'm a bit kind of fussy, to be honest with you. I'd much rather take a bit longer and collect really pure spirit myself. So I'm just going to sort of leave it running at that relatively slow rate and see how we go. So I've got the easy dens here, and I'm just going to syringe out a little sample like that. So I'm going to suck out. It'd probably be easier if I put this into a glass first, but I'm trying to suck it straight out of the parrot. Here we go. All right, I'm going to stick this on here and overflow into this little shaker. And I want to put a reasonable sample because I want to clear out the water, which is already in the easy dens. So I'll push a fair bit through. Stop before I get that bubble. And on the easy dens app, It's showing me 95.9. Perfect. So it's pretty much, it is azeotrope really. I would be interested to see if I did another syringe whether it would go up slightly higher, because this was rinsed out with water previously. But anyway, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And obviously I'm reconfirming that reading obviously on the actual, the alcometer as well, since we give me the same result. So look, I'm pretty happy with that. That's going to give me some really clean neutral spirit, and in a few moments we'll actually taste some as well. Okay, so I've slowed my collection rate down slightly. I actually had this vapor collection valve open about halfway. I've closed it up so it's about maybe a third closed now. Basically, when I had it at halfway, the spirit was coming out and it was just dripping out of this output here at a rate of about 3 liters per minute. But look, it was honestly probably fine because I was getting already 95.9, so very, very close to azeotrope. But look, I wanted to get a little bit higher. I did check it with the DMA 35, and also I've got an Easy Dens here as well, so I checked it with both. But now I've got this running at a little bit of a slower rate like this, as you can see. So it's coming out a bit slower. I've actually already measured that with the stopwatch, and that collection rate is around about 1.5 liters per minute. So look, I'm kind of pretty happy with that. It's not going to take me too long. I really prioritize quality over speed when it comes to making pure neutral spirit. So that's what I've done. I've also got some spirit. That's basically the stuff I pulled out previously at the slightly lower 95.9%. So I'm going to drop that in. I actually made this funny little funnel thing. I might show you this as well because it's kind of pretty handy, but it's actually like a little funnel. I'm sure you could use an actual funnel, but obviously I've got all these parts hanging around. So I made this little setup, which basically hooks up to the cam lock on my Bruzilla, and it goes down the recirculation arm. So what I can do is basically get spirit, pour it back in, and that'll just redistill. I don't have to take the lid off. No vapor escapes. And obviously, because the liquid goes down to the bottom dead center, there's also a vapor lock. So I find this actually a really handy little accessory for additions into the boiler halfway through a distillation run. All right, so I've basically got that set up. Let's take a couple readings with that DMA 35. Okay, so I've got the DMA 35 here, and I'm just gonna suck a little bit of spirit out of here, like that, and pump it through here. And I might just do one more sample like that. Have a look at that little lens. I don't think I've got any bubbles in there. And I'm now getting 96.1. So look, I'm pretty happy with that. I do think that once you're getting over that 96 mark, you're getting some really, really good quality spirit. So look, I'm just gonna keep collecting the rest of the run. I'm also gonna keep an eye on the temperature up on that probe just at the top there. So when the temperature starts to climb, I'm gonna basically, so this probe here, when that temperature there starts to climb a little bit, I'm gonna start either gonna stop the process, or I could potentially collect the tails. Look, the only negative about collecting tails is then I've got all that fusel oils on the packing. I have to clean it more thoroughly. So look, if you wanna be thrifty, some people get the tails, throw it through again, but to be honest with you, because I've got so much spirit in here, and I've got heaps of spirit at home as well, to be honest with you, I think I might just sort of, cut the process off and kill it at that. Okay, I've been going for a number of hours. I'm getting towards the end of the batch here. I've got a few telltale signs saying I'm near the end. Firstly, I know how much alcohol I've collected. So that's a pretty, good indicator that I've got to the end of the batch. But I've already changed over the last keg. So I did have an Oxybar 8 litre on here, which was getting close-ish to the top. I'd probably say it had 6-7 litres in there. And I know that I had a wash here, which had about 8 litres of alcohol to begin with. So look, I'm obviously getting close from that perspective. The other thing is the boiler. The boiler has reached 100 degrees. So, pretty much in the bottom of the column, I reckon I've got pretty much no spirit left in here. And then also this thermometer has started to climb in temperature. So I'm really getting towards the end here. To squeeze a little bit more out of the batch, what I've done is I've gone to this vapor control valve here. I've turned this right down so there's not much vapor coming out now. So the reflux ratio would be right up there. And then the other thing is it's really started to slow down on the output here. So you can see that there. Basically, just getting a very, very slow drip as I get towards the end. And I've got, I don't know, maybe less than a litre, or maybe a litre collected in this Oxybar 8 litre so far. So let's just have a quick check. also on the old DMA 35. So I'm just going to empty this guy out in the sink here, and I'll take a sample here. And I reckon it probably will have dropped slightly, I'm guessing. And yes, it certainly has. So I have dropped now. I'm coming to the end of the run, and now we're hitting 95.3% ABV. So that's like definitely a little bit down. I'm going to keep this. I don't want to put this into the rest of my good, spirit, I suppose. I might redistill this at some stage. But anyway, that's more or less it at this stage. So I'm probably going to shut off this process very, very soon. Look, another thing you could also do is, I think I will probably do this next time actually. See this thermometer? I think I'm going to put multiple down the column, because what you'll be able to also see, had I done that, is if you had multiple probes, you'll be able to see the gradient. And one thing is, when you're getting towards the end of the run, you'll see the temperature of the column itself the hotter temperatures will start reading up the column like that. And that makes it very, very easy for you to tell where you are in the process. So I think I will actually put a few more probes in there so I can give myself a bit of a heads up on the next run. Okay, so we've got to the end and it's time to do some tasting. Firstly, I'll give you the stats. Basically, we did 1 whole day worth of distillation. Look, I didn't take the exact number of hours, but might have been about maybe 10 hours from start to finish, including heat up time or something like that, I guess. And then the other thing I'll say is, yeah, we got about 7 litres of 96.1%, so pretty pure spirit there. And then we also got about another litre, or just under a litre worth of the 95.8. So just as it was sort of tapering off there, I collected the last little bit in oxybarate later, and that just had a little bit of tails type of fusel oil smell about it. So I kept that one separate. Now, what would I do differently? I've actually kind of smelt these already, and there is an ever so slight turbo yeast smell in the 96.1. So that's a straight 96.1 I've got in this glass. And then I've got also it watered down to 40% ABV in this glass here. And look, to be quite honest with you, the 40% is even less noticeable, but look, I am particularly sensitive when it comes to this type of stuff. Now, if I was going to do this again, and this is what I would normally do when I'm running this type of wash through the still, I would normally do a stripping run. But look, I didn't do that in this instance because I just wanted to show you guys, look, how good a job you could get passing it through the still in one hit and showing how high proof you could get it just with one crack through the Polyphoenix. But yeah, certainly I think it would be well worth it doing a stripping run first. And I probably would remove that just ever so slight amount of odor in there. Look, a lot of guys who make spirit at home, they would probably be very happy with this, and that they would probably just use it straight away. And look, if you're putting essences in it, it probably wouldn't even be noticeable at all. But look, I'm going to make some really fine gins out of this in a next video. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run it through the still again. It's going to be like uber pure. So I'm going to water it back down to 40%, put it back in the boiler, and then distill the whole lot again, and then see if I can just scrub out that last little bit of aroma. The other thing that would be worthwhile doing, and I haven't done this, is always passing it through carbon filtration. So I'd highly recommend, look, irrespective of the situation, always kind of do that, because it really will make a big difference in the final purity of your neutral. So those two things are ones I would change. Now the third thing would be, if I was going to do a wash again, look, I'm much more of a fan of doing washes which aren't right up at that maximum, 20% ABV. Yes, the yield's fantastic up there, but look, I'm sure the other thing was, if I did a wash which was down at say 10% ABV, maybe even use something like rice instead, which is one of my personal favorites, I think I'd end up getting a much better result too in that respect. Or a little bit better result, I should say, not much better, but a little better result in that respect. So look, they're my sort of tips, I guess, in conclusion of the situation. Look, if you've got any other questions or there's any other tips that you want to share with other members like yourself, please put it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. The other thing is, sign up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're literally going to do some more distillation runs. We're going to do like a rum and a whiskey, and also like going to do a gin and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to show off all the features of the Polyphoenix still, and you want to know when those videos land, so hit the bell icon, of course, as well as subscribing. The other thing you can do is join up to our Facebook homebrew community group. We're just starting to get these stills out. We haven't sold many yet because we haven't had all the parts available, but yeah, they're just starting to get out on the website very shortly, in which case there'll be other people just like yourself sharing tips and tricks on how to use it, get the most out of it, and so forth. So search Facebook homebrew community group, join that one, and be part of that discussion as well. Anyway, thanks for that, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.